you always hear like the advice, oh yeah, specialization is better. But like you really truly don't understand the full impact until you just do it.
You're listening to the Open Agency Podcast, where we put you inside the brains of some of the best agency owners, freelancers, firms, and industry experts. Listen in as we unpack the strategies they've used to grow their business and the important lessons they've learned. Stay tuned and make sure to join the community at openagency.org.
Hey everyone, Mike Black here, excited to share with you episode number 5 of the Open Agency Podcast. Today our guest is Jedi Weller, CEO of OpenForge, sharing with us how he grew his mobile app development company to 20 employees in just 2 years. Now, how did he do this so quickly? Jedi decided early on to focus on specializing. You'll hear me say this over and over again on this podcast. There are so many benefits to niching down with your agency. It makes growing an agency so much easier across the board, from client acquisition, hiring, creating better work for clients, which also leads to charging more for your services. Not specializing early on with my company, Told Media, is something that I would change if I could go back and do things differently. So with that being said, here's Jedi to talk about how he's building a company that specializes.
Jedi, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, good to be here. Always sunny in Philadelphia, so it's a nice day to do this.
Yeah, so before we jump into things here, do you mind giving everyone a little bit of background on yourself and what you guys do at OpenForge?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Jedi Weller. I'm the founder of OpenForge. We are mobile app specialists. So we've been building mobile apps for about 6 years now, actually. And yeah, I like long walks on the beach, like martinis, all that jazz.
That's funny. So you've been doing this for 6 years now. How big is OpenForge? How many employees do you
have? We got about 20 people right now, mostly based in the U.S. here. Just due to some regulations in terms of like HIPAA requirements for like healthcare applications.
Sure.
Yeah, most of them full time as well. So it's been a pretty crazy ride, right? But it's been fun.
Yeah, and most of your team members are based in Philadelphia, correct?
Yeah. I think we have about, maybe about like 10 or 12 of the 20 are based here in Philly, or on the East Coast at least. Like we have like one guy down in Georgia, but yeah, most are here in Philly. Philly's where our headquarters are.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't think I ever had the opportunity to go to your office, but I remember we hung out once or twice when I was based in Philly, and I remember seeing you at an event. I think you had a booth at like a Philly tech show. And I just remember,
yeah.
Is that what it was called? I don't even remember.
Yeah, it was probably a part of Philly Tech Week. It was probably like the Entrepreneur Expo, or like one of the events like as part of Philly Tech Week, because they have a bunch. It's like a whole week. But it was probably either that or like the launch party for it. I forget. My memory is so shitty anymore.
Yeah, well, I just remember thinking like there were so many people there, and I was like, damn, I really wish I got a booth.
Oh yeah. It's funny too because Bob Moore is the president. He actually just shot me an email yesterday being like, "Hey Jedi, we thought of you. We got this expo coming up again. Yeah, would you like to be part?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" Always down to support the Philly.
Yeah. So on that topic, we can get into client acquisition a little bit. Do you guys do a lot of expos?
Actually, no. I would say not, to be honest. So like we're in a really interesting spot. So OpenForge, like we focus on mobile apps, like just mobile applications. And we used to, back 6 years ago with the prior company, which was WebJunto, it used to be more of like a generalized like design and development shop. But what we realized is like 90% of all of our revenues is just coming from mobile, and especially with our partnership with Ionic. So do you know Ionic Framework?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the people listening, if you're not technical, Ionic is, I believe, a cross-platform framework, so you can develop apps on iOS and Android with one code base.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an amazing framework. I mean, like I've tried them all. I've tried them I've tried React. I used to use like, PhoneGap, Sencha, right? It's like literally all of them. And, like a lot of cross-platform frameworks, with the exception of Unity and Corona SDK, which I think do a really good job, they basically preach like, code reuse and, one size fits all, but it just never was really the case. And Ionic seemed to really like fit that bill. So like they actually have that. So most apps we build, there's only going to be maybe like, I don't know, 5% of code customization on the entire app between iOS and Android. The rest is all going to be kind of built out of the box, which is really cool. So anyway, we started a partnership with them, years ago when they were first in beta, and we put one or two of our clients on it to test it out. The software was really solid, and we said, okay, well, you know what? Let's just continue along this, and that's kind of like that's been our specialty ever since, and part of how we grew.
That's super interesting. I've never played around with Ionic, but one thing I found super interesting is what you just talked about in terms of really niching down on building mobile apps versus being, maybe a digital product agency and working on web apps and design work. And when I went to openforge.io, your website, at first I was like, oh, wow, are they just doing mobile? I wasn't too sure because when I landed there, it was mobile solutions for a digital world. So now you're saying you guys have just completely focused on mobile. At what point did you decide to do that?
So I'd say about 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, me and my co-founder split. And then when I took over the operations, took over the team, and I formed a new business entity, I took a look at, again, like all of our revenues. And I said, you know what? Everything is coming from mobile, essentially, right? And everything that's not coming from mobile was, like one-off projects or things that ended up costing us more than we actually made from it, right? So it was really just like a financial decision, but also like a specialization decision. How much there is in the technology space and how quickly technology changes. Right? Well, if you have to staff people to keep up with all these different technologies and all these different frameworks, right, it becomes a lot, right? And then you have to manage the quality of the projects, et cetera. So by focusing down and just staying mobile, we're able to basically provide a better value add, right, to our customers. We're able to target better. We're able to say who we are a lot better. If someone asks me, okay, well, what is OpenForge, right? And I say, oh, well, we're design and development agency. We do all types of projects, like blah 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 blah, right? You're gonna start zoning out, right? You're gonna be like, okay, I'm falling asleep here. And you're not going to be able to say it to your friend. If your friend asks you, okay, what does OpenForge do? You're going to be like, well, I think he said blah, blah, blah. Okay, he's in software. But what does that mean? There's so many things with software. Well, now instead, if somebody asks you, okay, what does OpenForge do? Oh, OpenForge builds mobile apps. Easy. It completely changes the way that you actually phrase your branded identity, who you are, right? And that's made such a big impact on our team.
Yeah, and I love this. I love that you guys did this because not only do I think you're adding more value to clients by niching down like that and getting really good.
We call them customers now.
With your customers. But you're getting really good at that specific technology that you're working with and that specific thing that you're doing. And now it becomes easier to build out a team that's very specialized in that as well.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And we also build out processes around it. So, like you're in technology, how hard it is. You bring on a new team member. They worked in a different company who had different processes and, XYZ, maybe different expectations on the code level, maybe different expectations on team culture, so many things. Well, when we had this narrow focus, now everyone knows the mission of OpenForge. Now everyone knows what we're specializing in. And what we've also found is that we're attracting talent that's much more interested in what we're doing. Like it's no longer just people who are like, yeah, I'm a software developer, so hire me, I need a job. Now it's people who are saying, well, hey, mobile is fucking awesome. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. It's fucking awesome.
All right, cool. Sweet. All right, yeah, it's fucking awesome. Great. Good. I curse like a sailor too. So. But yeah, people are coming to us and saying, hey, like, this is awesome. Like I get to work on mobile apps, and like, this is, amazing. Like I use all mobile apps, like I was raised in mobile apps, especially as we're getting into a younger generation. So yeah, it completely changes the picture when you specialize. And I know people say it all the time, you always hear like the advice, oh yeah, specialization is better. But like, you really, truly don't understand the full impact until you just do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for anyone who's like listening, who wants a better explanation of specialization than I could ever provide, there's an amazing book called Built to Sell that like my peer advisory group of other business founders recommended to me, and now I like flaunt the shit. I actually bought a copy of it for every team member at OpenForge, just so they could understand the changes that we're making and that we made 2 years ago, and that way they know why we're specializing, why we're doing the things we're doing. Now, it doesn't mean we're looking to sell the company, but and it especially doesn't mean that you need to sell, even though the title is Built to Sell. It's more about creating a valuable company and something that can go on without you. Because one of the biggest issues that we have as founders, especially of a services-based company, is what happens when we're gone. Can the company actually operate without us? Because a lot of times in services-based agencies, right, you're looking at the top for the best expertise. I'm going to be charging the highest consulting value. Why? Well, because I built 100 apps. I've seen it. I can easily go into a room and in 2 hours do what someone else would take 10 hours to do. But that's not truly good for an organization. That's good for me if I wanted to be a consultant, which I don't want to do, but it's not good for an organization. So Built to Sell is all about how to basically take an agency and turn it into an operation that every single role is redundant. Every single role has a place, can be replaced, and everything is processed out in a way that your team, your customers, everyone, they understand what you're selling, what you're doing, and how to do it.
I've heard a couple of friends of mine recommend that Built to Sell. It's on my reading list. I'm gonna jump on that and take it.
Yeah, read it, man. It's great.
And this is super awesome though. So you niche down on mobile. Are you just doing Ionic, or are you doing other mobile languages like say Swift or Java?
Nope, we just use Ionic.
Use Ionic. So that's super awesome. Because now you can go and say, anyone that's looking for an Ionic, I mean, dude, if we have a project that comes through, it's an Ionic project, guess who I'm hitting up? Talking to Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. And likewise, right? So we actually had someone the other day who came to us from a major financial institution, and they have a React app. And I said, okay, well, we would only be able to work with you if it was an Ionic. We could do your next app for you, but I can refer this out to partners that we have. So it's also a great way to give that referral business, because the last thing that either of us want is to make a promise to a customer that we can't deliver on. So if I try to take on this React app, yeah, it might be temporary revenue, but I guarantee you it's going to cause more problems than it's worth. Whereas if I say, hey, Mike, I got this potential customer, they're looking for some React help. This ain't up our wheelhouse. Is this something you can do? And you're like, yeah, well, now it benefits you. And you do likewise for me for Ionic. So yeah, it definitely works out a lot better.
Yeah, and unfortunately for us, told media is way too general. It's probably one of the biggest mistakes I made when starting our agency is told media. We're a digital product agency. We do mobile apps. We do web apps. We do specialize in a couple languages, but we don't specialize down to the level that you have. And that's not a good way to build a business. So people that are listening that are, either a freelancer or a smaller agency, my suggestion looking back is to go the route Jedi's going here and niche down as early as possible. Like pick that one technology or that one technical thing, no matter what you're doing. If you're a marketing agency or a bookkeeping service, like figure out what that one thing is that you're really, really good at and specialize, because it becomes much easier to hire people and it becomes much easier to scale, grow, and close deals.
Yep, absolutely. And especially as a freelancer, as a freelancer, your reputation, your brand is you, so how do I describe you? If I say, okay, Mike, he knows, 5 different technologies and he does X, Y, Z. Well, I can't refer that to someone. If someone asks me, at a pub and they say, hey, Jedi, I'm working on this project right now. And, I'm really looking for, a person that does X. Well, you might not have described that X, but if you are the mobile guy, if you are the React guy, if you are the XYZ guy, well, then it's very easy for people to know what your brand is, and you're going to get much better business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Was it hard for you guys when you made that decision to just focus on Ionic to turn down projects that weren't
Ionic? It's fucking terrifying. Yeah, it was terrifying, man. It's like I got 20 mouths to feed. And, I got people coming to me with revenue, right? Saying, hey, we will pay you to do this WordPress, website. We'll pay you to do this XYZ. It's honestly, that's the scariest part about it is you have to say no to things that don't match your direct vision. And yeah, like it was the hardest decision, but it was the
Totally.
most fruitful.
Totally understand that. So I'm curious, did you start off as a freelancer?
No, no, I didn't. I mean, like, in college, so I mean, I've been coding since like, I was, I don't know, like, what, maybe 9 years old, like 90, actually, I guess 11 years old. So back around like 98, I started out coding because I used to play this old video game called Tribes 2. I don't know, have you ever played it? Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of it.
So it was like a first person shooter. And, basically it's just a typical first person shooter. But the cool thing about it was that they had clan pages, right? It was one of the first video games to have clan pages. Well, in order to customize your clan page, you had to write it in HTML and CSS. They just had like a little, editor in there. So I was like, oh, I really want to have my own clan. So I learned HTML and CSS to do that. And then from then on, I just became like fascinated with coding. And so, I've been coding my whole life. Now in college, I was kind of in like an interesting position because I was, I grew up in the country. I grew up in Amish country. I grew up on a farm, 83-acre farm, actually. So like my family, we didn't have like money to just throw around. I was broke and working 3 jobs. And I was like, well, you know what? I really want to go into business. Like it's always been my dream. But at the same time, I feel like a business degree is not going to get me financially where I need to be because I don't have connections. I don't have XYZ, right? So I was like, well, what am I good at? What do I know will at least like help me pay the bills a little bit? And that was software engineering. So I graduated with software engineering. I worked for maybe a couple of years in corporate life and I fucking hated it, man. I was so miserable. I was like, this is the worst thing in the world. I felt like a flower wilting on the inside. Like I was in cubicles with no freaking sunlight. I was in meetings all day. It was just horrible. So I was like, I gotta get out of this shit. So then I became director of operations for a startup out in the West Coast. That was, that was a lot of fun. That was the exact opposite. I was still based out of Philly, man, but I was flying out to La Jolla every 2 weeks, and they would put me up in La Jolla next to San Diego for 2 weeks at a time. So I'd be like, kicking up at the beach, with my laptop, and I was like, oh, this is cool shit. And then that company went under because the founder was a crook and like stole, I guess, the investors' money. So
interesting.
yeah. So that one failed miserably. But at the same time, towards the end of it, or actually in that company, I was hosting a hackathon series called Hack for Good, and we basically partnered, technologists with nonprofits, and we'd bring nonprofits in, and then we would just kind of like hack on projects for them. You know what I mean? To do some social good.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually scaled that up to about 34 cities worldwide simultaneously over the course of 2 years.
Oh wow!
And yeah, it was fantastic. Like we had cities as far as like, the Ukraine, like Kiev and Odessa, and there's a whole story, a whole really cool like story of how we built this up. But I think that's outside the scope of this podcast. But needless to say, as I was building it up, that's when I met my old co-founder, Liz, and we just started.
That was for WebJunto.
For WebJunto, yeah, WebJunto, doesn't matter, yeah. Yeah, and so we just became friends. We were, civic hacking together. It was a great foundation. So, she knew all this shit was going on with Geeklist, and she's like, "Hey, your paychecks are bouncing right now. You gotta get out of there. Why don't we start a business together?" And I was like, "All right," but I was like, with the last paycheck bounce, I was like, I got about $2,000 in my bank account, and I got about $4,000 a month in expenses right now. I just bought a house, and I was like, fuck it, let's just do it. So we went into business. The first 6 months of business, I'd say it was more like, kind of like freelancing because it was just me and her.
Mm-hmm.
So I did all the dev work and all the sales. She did all the design work and the branding. And then as we scaled that company up, it just became more of a, agency owner role. And yeah, so no, I never really, that's a very long way of saying I never really freelanced.
Well, no, that was a really cool story. So in the earlier days of WebJunto, because I do want to talk a little bit about that. When you had started, you said about like 6 months, it was just you and your partner. At what point did you start hiring maybe your first employee, second employee, third employee?
So first we brought in interns because that's when you're a small business.
You always bring on the interns first.
Yeah, that's what you gotta do. I've always believed in being very transparent. So, with one of our interns who came on, her name was Courtney, and she was fantastic developer, and she's all self-taught. She came to us because she wanted to learn how to code, and she had already been teaching herself for a couple of years, but she wanted like the actual professional, experience and that mentorship. So when she came on as an intern, we saw clearly that she was starting to contribute, amazing work. So I said to her, I was like, hey, look, we really want to hire you, but we don't even know how much money we're making. It's like month to month. So we want to make this fair. So how about this? What we'll do is we'll say that for the first year, anything we make, basically anything the company makes, we just cut it into a third. And then after that will give us like a foundation. And then after year one, then we can put you on a regular salary. And it was fair because anything we made, she made. You know what I mean? It might have been $200. It might have been $2,000. I think having that transparency with her and also the whole team, like that wasn't just her, right? That was our whole team. We had like transparent salaries, and we still do to this day, like OpenForge, we have transparent salaries. We use a formula for how we call it like salary and equity is calculated. So if a new person comes onto the team, we can basically say, okay, well, it doesn't matter, your gender, it doesn't matter your race, here's how we calculate it. It's all laid out in the beginning. So that way we prevent, any sort of, discrimination, intentional or unintentional.
So do you mind sharing kind of what that looks like? Is it more like if you have this many years of experience in mobile development, then this is where your salary is at? Or is it like you have this much of like leadership experience? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So have you heard of the company Buffer app?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Buffer was actually the first company that I know of to do this, to release all their stuff publicly as a Google spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And they had a formula. So I literally just copied and pasted the
Okay.
spreadsheet. And I was like, okay, here, let's just use this because it's tried and true. So yeah, like the formula includes your experience level. It includes whether you're full-time or part-time. It includes your role. Different types of roles have different, like weights to them. But yeah, and I can totally like send you a link to that as well. So
yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. I've seen that exact spreadsheet you're talking about. Buffer's pretty cool. They share everything with like internal operations with people on their website, and I've gotten a lot of inspiration to share. We're going to be sharing our internal like finances and operations as well, and that was kind of what inspired a little bit of starting Open Agency and the Open Agency podcast was, bringing on guests like yourself to be open about, operations to share with other people. So then they can go and, use your spreadsheet to calculate how they're going to pay their employees. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And actually that's actually why we're called OpenForge. Open because of the belief in transparency and, and sharing what we do with the world, and Forge because we're creators, right? We're builders, we build mobile apps. So that's actually how our name came about too. So
that's super cool, man. I didn't even
synergy there,
for some reason it didn't even click. I don't know why. Yeah. When I heard your new company was going to be called OpenForge, I didn't even think of that. So that's pretty cool. Back onto the topic of Webjunto and growing Webjunto. So I want to know, like, in the earlier days of growth, what did that look like? Like, how did you guys go about growing, and what did you guys get to Webjunto to? How many employees?
What do we get? Maybe like, I forget, to be honest. Maybe like 14.
Gotcha. So how did you go about, going from just you and your partner to 14 employees in, 3-4 year period of time?
It's a great question. So, I mean, there's a couple things, right? And I guess to preface this, so when Webjunto went out of business, it's because me and my co-founder Liz, we split up. We saw different ways, and it caused a shutdown of the company. So even though we've been doing this for 6 years, OpenForge is a new company from Webjunto. Now, with that said, Webjunto closed on, let's say, like March 26th, and then OpenForge opened on March 27th. Mm-hmm. I brought a lot of the team with us. I brought a lot of the clients with us. And Liz was all cool with this, right? It's like this was part of our agreement, right? But all of a sudden, all of the money that was in the bank at Webjunto, right, we split between us and all the employees. Mm-hmm. So now I think I took like maybe 10 people over from Webjunto, mm-hmm. and all of a sudden I only had $100,000 in the bank at OpenForge, right? And I was like, wow, all right, I gotta build this a lot quicker then we built WebJunto up, right? Because WebJunto, it took us 4 years to get there, right? And now at OpenForge, we're larger than we ever were at WebJunto, right? And only a 2-year period. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with community building. So we run the Startup Junto, like Philly Junto events, which are which we basically just bring startup founders together to share openly with each other, lessons learned, advice, right? XYZ. We run the Ionic meetup in the city. We run the Angular meetup in the city. So we just do a lot of stuff for the community. And I think that's one of the best ways to get your brand out. It's not going out and asking people for something, right? It's going out and paying it forward and saying, hey, I can help you. Here's how I can help you, right? This isn't related to money. Well, if I help you, you're going to remember, just like if you help me, I'm going to remember. So if someone then asks you, okay, well, hey, who do I call from mobile apps? Right? Well, OpenForge.
Definitely.
So yeah, that's how we built both companies.
So the big, I guess, client acquisition strategy, which it might not be all client acquisition. A lot of it is like, hey, we really want to give back. But you've got a lot of clients from creating these communities in the Philly area.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Pretty cool. Now, you did touch on something earlier with kind of like WebJunto shutting down. You and your partner kind of wanted to go different ways, et cetera. And I know it told media I'm the only founder, which can be hard at sometimes. But there's definitely pros to being a solo founder versus having a partner.
Yeah,
and,
there are pros.
Yeah, when you choose the wrong partner, or if you just kind of go different directions in what you want out of life, things can get pretty tough. So, at what point running WebJunto where you're like, you know what, this partnership's not working out, and I want to do different things?
I mean, for me personally, I started taking on more responsibilities, and I think at the end of the day, what my co-founder said to me is just that she doesn't want to do this anymore, right? Having an agency is a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. And you have to know that at the end of each day, you are directly responsible for the livelihood of all the people who follow you. That's not an easy weight to bear.
Definitely not.
So really, she just wanted out of the business. And we didn't have, even though we had set up what we call it the partnership agreement in the very beginning that was created, we had a law firm do it and everything. What they don't tell you is that when two 50-50 co-founders disagree, right, and they can't come to a resolution themselves, yes, there's arbitration clauses and all that, but that shit would take months, right? And then while that's going on, your company's going to be slowly being depleted of funds through legal fees, through your attention being spent on internal strife versus external.
Yep.
So I have to say, one of the things I was very grateful to Liz about, right, and is that she was a very good co-founder. And I still say to this day, I could not have done WebJunto without her. I could not have learned as much from her as I did, obviously, without her. I say that's definitely a pro to it. Now, with that said, right, after we split and then I had full control of OpenForge, we grew a lot faster because there was no longer everything needed to be decided 50-50. I think there's pros and cons to it. So, yeah. So, I mean, there's upsides to both sides, I guess, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like OpenForge is doing really well. And you're the only owner at OpenForge. You don't have any partners, correct?
Correct. Now, we treat our company as a shareholder company. So everyone has not only equity in the company, but we also do a profit share. So we also do a 15% profit share to all of the team members. And, so basically my belief is that you shouldn't just work for a company. You should work as part of a company. And if the company succeeds, you succeed, right? So everyone's in it for the same reward. So I'm the only, we call it 100%
founder.
Founder stock owner. Yeah. But everyone has a piece of OpenForge and everyone controls OpenForge. Actually, I would even argue the team controls OpenForge at this point more than I do. we had our company retreat the other week and the team basically ran it. And, they put their goals, right? We put our financial goals, we put our personal goals, we put our blah, blah, right? And the whole team is on the same page, which is awesome to the point that one of the number one goals was dethrone Jedi, they said.
I love it. That's funny.
Yeah, and what they meant with by that, just to be clear, is they meant like, hey, Jedi's role is the last role that is not easily reproducible at the company.
Exactly.
So let's fix that.
Exactly. Build something that's more scalable, and if Jedi leaves the company doesn't go under.
Exactly. So, and I was so proud of them for that as well. I was like, you guys, you're making me cry here.
Yeah. So I'm super interested in what you said about profit share. So I'm really curious. I'm sure there's been a lot of positive effects that you've seen from that. One that kind of just pops off the top of my head is, have you seen like your employees are more picky with other employees that they allow into the company because of the profit share?
That's a good question. I would say yeah. I mean, I don't think it has to do with being more picky with who they allow into the company, but they feel more ownership of the company, right? So like our whole team knows that they truly own a piece of this company. Like this is really theirs, right? And everything that they do builds this up, and it makes us succeed. So when we talk about bringing on people, like the constant question is, are they going to fit our culture? Are they going to represent our brand? Right? Are they going to do X, Y, Z? The actual skills, I mean, the skills almost matter a little bit less coming in, right? So to a certain extent, because things can be taught and things can be trained, but really it's like the people and like their motivation. Everyone on our team, right, is just so crazy talented, so crazy skilled, and just so crazy motivated. It's really amazing. And I think the only way you retain people like that is by making them part of what they're building, right? Not just building something for someone else.
Definitely. So I'm curious, when you're going about hiring team members that fit the culture and fit the mission of OpenForge really well, what kind of people are you looking for?
That's a good question. I don't really lead recruiting anymore for our company. The team took that responsibility from me. You'd have to ask them.
Sure.
One of the things that we do though, and that was a practice that I put into place, is we have coding interviews that are take home and open source, as well as design interviews that are the same thing. Sometimes we pay for these, sometimes we don't. So like, for instance, on the design side, if we have a designer coming in to be interviewed, well, at the end of the day, anyone can put anything on paper. Anyone can study the same like interview handbook as HR reps are given. You know what I mean? So, you can pass a coding interview, you can pass an XYZ, right? But what we don't get to see a lot of times is their actual work, and their work applied to a real world situation. So what we'll do is, like, for instance, from the design side, we're building an app called Startup Wars right now. It's one of our own. It's it's one of our own products. And, as part of that, we are looking to hire a second full-time designer. So we're actually offering, paid interviews where we basically say, hey, we give them a sketch file with a single screen. We give them a prompt, and we say, hey, here's $300 or whatever it is. Take a weekend and do what you can. If you only change one circle to a square, well, you're probably not going to get the job, but you're still paid. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter the quality of the work. This is an opportunity to see what the quality is, but you get paid either way. And what we found is that that's a really good way of, for a very low entry point, like a very low cost point, really getting to see what a person's work is and how they work too. What's the process that they take? What's the justification they take? Because we'll see all sorts of responses to the exact same question. We'll see some people take it, they'll disappear for, 3 days, then they'll come back, they'll just send us a file and say, hey, I enjoyed this, here you go. Nothing else. And then we have other people who, along the entire weekend, are emailing us saying, hey, I wanted clarification on this, I wanted this, I wanted that, right? And then they send us a summary at the very end saying, well, here was my thought process. Here was what I went through. Here's the, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the end result. And to be honest, the end result matters so much less than the rest of it.
Definitely. Yep.
So, we introduced that, and that's really helped our hiring process, both from the design and dev side. We do the same thing. We have every developer who applies to us, they do an open source mobile app. They use Ionic, and we just ask them to hook up the GitHub API. We have a very simple prompt, and the actual work itself. I mean, if you've built, like in Ionic and let's say Angular before, well, this exercise is probably only going to take you 4 hours. And, if you're slightly newer to it, you have a little bit of learning. Well, maybe it'll take you 8, maybe it'll take you 12, but no matter how long it takes you, what we want to see is we want to see those frequent commits. We want to see, detail. We want to see your learning process. We always try to give an assignment in which they have to learn something. And we also want to see your initiative. If you don't care enough to do a 4-hour assignment, which would be the equivalent of studying for 4 hours for an interview, well, then you don't care enough to join our team.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. We just started somewhat recently doing paid assignments, and it's been really great, especially when you think you have a candidate, you think they're really good, and then you get to the assignment and it's just like, wow, like, thank God I put these assignments in place, because, they either were really poor at communicating and they weren't going back and forth like you had expected, or B, like sometimes they fall short technically, and they weren't as good of an engineer or a designer or a video editor as or whatever it may be as you had thought. And an assignment's a really easy way to kind of compare applicants against each other when you're recruiting for important roles.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it makes such a difference, So
that's pretty cool, man. So now you guys at OpenForge, you're 20 employees. What's next for OpenForge? Are you going to continue focusing on Ionic, or do you think there'll be a point where it's like, okay, you know what? Now let's look at Cordova or React Native or web apps. Do you think that point will ever happen, or do you think you guys are going to continue to focus on Ionic?
Yeah. So in terms of keeping up with latest technology, right? We always want to keep up with latest technology. So basically, everything we build now as an Ionic app is immediately a PWA as well. We are technically building web apps if the client wants to deploy it as a web app, but our rule is it has to be mobile first, right? And it has to be in Ionic framework. Now, the team of developers specifically, they like to tinker. So, we've opened up the realm of doing Ionic with React, right? Or Ionic with Vue, right? So like the technology doesn't matter so much, so long as it fits the process. And our process is all around mobile apps, because with mobile applications, there's so much that you need to know that like, a founder will need to know, or even a developer would need to know, or a designer would need to know, right? It's its own niche of the industry. And, like we have our team memorizing the Apple developer guidelines. We have our team, memorizing, right? How to use different Ionic components, right? So that, instead of just having a regular graphic designer, go in and start designing with no experience at all on how that design is going to actually, affect from a scalability standpoint. Well, we have our designers, study, okay, what is ADA compliancy? How does that relate to mobile? Because it's part of the law here. Mobile apps have to be ADA compliant, right? What are some different components we can use in the Ionic framework? So if I'm designing out a card component, I have a choice. Do I design out a card that, has all these bells and whistles that, is going to take, 100 hours of development to implement? Or do I just custom style this, Ionic component, I achieve the same exact result, but now it's all automatically scalable. And now it's only going to take 1 hour to implement, So yeah, there's like a lot of, I guess like training we do on that niche. I forget the actual initial question. I just kind of went on a tangent there.
No, you're good. So the initial question was just, what's next for OpenForge in terms of growth and growing the company? Are you going to just be focusing, continue to focus on Ionic, or, is there other technologies web, maybe you get into doing web apps eventually? Like what does growth look like?
Yeah. So the vision of OpenForge, is mobile. Right. So the means to the end is, kind of irrelevant, so to speak. Right. So yes, we use Ionic because we think it's the best, framework for accomplishing mobile products. But the vision of OpenForge is, again, the open part of it. It's sharing our knowledge, sharing our processes with other teams, with other agencies, with other developers and designers, teaching them how to do what we do. From a marketing standpoint too, there's like ASL, which stands for App Store Optimization. It's something that almost no one talks about, but it's a big part of releasing an app on the App Store, right? And actually monetizing it. So the next step for OpenForge is we're actually in the process right now of converting our entire website from being purely a flyer, which is essentially what most agency websites are right now, to being a HubSpot of content. So we want everyone to come to OpenForge, not to necessarily have to pay us to build a product, but to learn from us and from others in the community how to build mobile apps.
That's super awesome. That's really awesome. So in terms of kind of being open and sharing things that have worked really well for OpenForge, what would you say if you had to pick one or two things, operations wise or things you guys do internally that really, really well? What would those one or two things be that you'd like to share with everyone?
Sure. So I think operations wise, the best thing that we do is our design process. So what we do is we require both designers and developers to basically follow the same processes. And I was actually just out in California speaking about that same thing at Developer Week. So typically you have a developer thinking, okay, well, I'm a developer, I use Git, I'm a logical thinker, I'm not really like the design team. Design team thinking, okay, well, I'm a designer, right? I'm more creative. I get so frustrated with the dev team that they can never communicate with me. That's how you're laughing, right? Can you relate to that?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So that's a problem with our industry. Our entire industry is taught only how to communicate within themselves. Developers are taught to communicate to other developers. Designers are taught to communicate with other designers. Business folk are taught to communicate with other business folk, right? No one has a common language. So what we did was we established a common language. So our design teams, our dev team, and the business requirements, which typically come from the customer, are all completely integrated. We have a rule. Every meeting requires one designer, one developer, and one business requirements person, like one business owner. Our processes for design, we spend about 30% more time on the design process. But the design process includes the developers, right? So it's no longer just a designer passing off a design to developers or a business analyst passing off a feature requirements doc to designers and then to developers, right? Separately. They all do that together. They all use versioning process. Our design team uses like Git standards, right? So our design team actually uses something called Sketch and Abstract, which is essentially GitHub for designs. So everyone is basically using the same uniform process and doing what we call like product mapping as the first stage of that.
That's really interesting. So have you seen more benefits on, cutting costs on projects, or have you seen more benefits on creating higher quality products with this? Both.
Yeah, definitely both. I mean, on cutting costs, right? Like I said, we spend about 30% more time on the design side, which costs more, but we save about 60% of development time, which is a huge savings. So overall, a project that might take, another team, I don't know, let's say arbitrary, $500,000, to do 5,000 man hours, it would only take us maybe 100,000 to 200,000, because the process is just so well put in place, right? And a lot of people ask, okay, well, how is that possible? Like, how does spending more time on the design side affect the development team in such ways, right? Well, if you look at it from this standpoint, you throw 10 developers into a project that's not truly clearly defined. Yeah, someone might think that the business requirements are defined, there's a 1,000-page user requirements doc. Well, no one can fucking understand a 1,000-page user requirements doc. And the thing about written requirements is that they're interpreted differently. I mean, look at the freaking Bible. How many different sects interpret the same Bible differently? It's the same thing with any written document. So what we do is we do visual requirements. We have a single source of truth for visual requirements. So that way, before anything is ever developed, everyone is signing off on a clickable prototype, right, with visual requirements that cannot be interpreted any other way. Like if you click this button, this happens, right?
Yep.
You see it, you read it, everything. And now when you have 10 people working on the same project, you no longer have one person, writing a PR and then another person being like, oh no, that wasn't actually the way the requirement was supposed to be. And then that affects the workload for the third person, right? Because they were waiting on that feature. So all of these things, they compound on each other. So, we avoid that by basically spending more time up front and getting the true requirements out.
That makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because we don't run our process that way for the most part. And thinking about that, it makes a lot of sense because there's not a lot of extra time being spent with interpretation, maybe going down the wrong rabbit hole. They're on the same page from get, and then after the prototype's created, then I'm assuming that's when it's kind of passed off to a developer to kind of take over.
Yeah, our developers actually scope from the clickable prototype. So like we do like 3 phases. We'll do an estimate, which as soon as we get like a wireframe, or basically just like a very quick like wireframe, we can do an estimate. We can say, okay, well, based upon other apps we've done, you're looking between 1,000 to 2,000 hours, right? And we can put it as a range. Then we create a product map, which is going to be a bird's eye view. And I have this format online. I can also share it. This is what we call product mapping. And that bird's eye view is going to show us not the user flows, but all the different screens annotated from both the design and dev side. Mm-hmm. Right. And from there, we can narrow that range down. And we can say, okay, well, you're really looking at 1,000 to 500 hours. And then from there, we do the final designs in the clickable prototype. And then the dev team goes through the clickable prototype, and then they do a la carte scoping. So they say, okay, this feature is going to take 10 hours. This one's going to take 20. This one's going to take 30. And then we add that up, and then that becomes the final estimate. And that process makes it so that when we actually estimate out the work, it's almost all the time we're going to hit budget, or a lot of times under, right? We actually just finished up a application for an insurance company out in Ohio. It was HIPAA compliant and everything, and we finished 25% under budget.
Wow. That would be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy.
I know, right? Yeah. So yeah, it definitely is helpful. It works.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Are there any other internal operations that you'd like to share that you think would be really, valuable for other agency owners to hear, or even freelancers?
Let me see. I would say like just having equal representation is a big thing. So we talk about diversity in the workforce in terms of gender, in terms of race, right? But we don't really talk about equal representation in terms of role. So if you're like me, right? I'm a developer by trade. So I always have an inkling where I want to trust the developer more because I understand the developer more. But if I have my lead designer in a room and my lead developer in a room, and they're both giving me advice, and I'm always favoring one side, well, then the products that we create and the processes that we create are always going to be skewed, and it's never truly going to be, one unified process amongst your team. So you have to, create that culture and that ecosystem.
And how do you go about doing that?
That's a long process. Maybe I should write a blog about that.
Save it for another time.
I think the easiest way of saying it is just stop making decisions, right? If you're the owner, empower your 2 leads to make the decisions for you. And it's going to be scary, but you're going to get much better results. And it's going to be results that they themselves are going to live up to because they're the ones who have created those rules and created those processes.
Definitely. Well, it's super interesting, man. Before we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to share with everyone?
Best of luck to everyone. Having an agency is, it's a lot of work, just like anything else is. I think one of the nice things about having an agency, about being able to freelance, is that, you have a little bit of financial security. As long as you're able and capable to work, you're always going to be able to make money. However, you have to be very, I think, reflective about what your goal is and who is the ideal client for you. So one of the things that we did is I actually created, it was the best business advice I was ever given. It was create a client checklist. So create a checklist of the ideal client for you, whatever it is for you. And every new person who comes to that door, you got to go to that checklist and they got to check off all the boxes. If they don't check off all the boxes, don't work with them. Doesn't matter how tempting it is. And if you do that, even though it's scary, because you're like, oh my God, I'm throwing away money. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're saving your time to be better spent on projects that match your vision for the company. So, I'd recommend to everyone. I think that's a very easy thing that anyone can implement. I think I even have like a blog about it, or maybe I even put just our checklist online. But yeah, I think that's going to be the the easiest thing to implement and one of the most impactful for anyone's businesses who are listening to this.
I think that's really, really, really good advice. I mean, we've had some clients we worked with, and I'm sure everyone listening that runs an agency has had clients they've worked with that are total nightmares.
Yeah.
What's nice is once you do this for a little bit, you start to know the clients that you really want to work with and the ones that you don't. So I really like the advice that you give. For everyone listening, Jedi, how can they get in contact with you? How can they learn more about you? And how can they learn more about OpenForge?
Yeah, sure. So our website is openforge.io. If you want to contact me, you can either do it on Twitter, Jedi Hacks, HACKS, or you can send me an email, jedi@openforge.io. I'm always happy to answer any questions from anyone. I haven't gotten here to where I am without the advice and input and help from others. So it's so important to me to also share with others so that everyone can grow and succeed together. It really is.
Jedi, I appreciate you coming on, man. You're an awesome dude.
You too.
I got a lot out of this session. I'm pretty excited to reflect on some of this and hopefully implement some of this stuff myself. So thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And maybe we can get together down in Miami soon, huh?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
That was Jedi Weller, CEO of OpenForge. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a whole lot to me if you subscribed, told some of your friends about it, or even left us a review so more people can find out about this podcast. Also, if you haven't yet, go check out the community at openagency.org. We're building a community for all you freelancers and agency owners to help each other grow, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week.